to me and I'll give you the key. It's easy. Just keep on hopping, keep on rocking, and don't start stopping. Everything you need just to plant the seed. And if you want to make it big, you give it to me, I'll embrace it. I believe for you, you wouldn't believe what I see in you. So don't stop. Don't let the dream drop off. Hold up and make it lovely, make it real, and make it yours. Don't stop.
All right, round number 2 with Meredith, Paci. We tried to record yesterday and there was some issues with the weather or something and it wouldn't let us. So you guys, I'm excited to have Meredith on the show. We met her through mutual coaches and some Clubhouse forums and things like that. And it was apparent right away that we were birds of a feather and that I had to get her on my show. So welcome so much, Meredith.
Thank you. Thank you. It's nice to be here.
And so also we discovered that we both used to be in dentistry, which is just another similarity that we have in our journey, which is totally hilarious.
I think it's awesome that we're both out of dentistry as well. I think that says a lot.
Thank God. I know people are always like, yeah, I would have people sit in my chair and they're like, yeah, I'm thinking about going to dental school and getting into dentistry. And I was always like, and how do you handle that? Do you go, I wouldn't recommend that.
Worst idea ever.
I know. So I was like, well, you know, make sure you go into an office and do a lot of job shadowing before you do it because it's a very high stress job. I feel like it contributed to a lot of the health conditions that I had. And when I got out of it, I didn't know how stressed I actually was until I got away from it. So I'm definitely glad you're out of it too.
Yeah, that was actually for me. I did know when I was in it. That's one of the things before I went into full-time coaching. I was obviously working full-time hygiene, and I was very aware of how stressful the environment was for me. All the ins and the outs we won't go into here, but I definitely knew that was a major trigger for me, and for me getting into coaching. I had wanted to be working hygiene and I had registered to go back to school to do holistic nutrition. And I was like, oh, it's going to be this beautiful transition. And, life was like, no, you need to literally just dive in and YOLO. And so that's how I got into full-time coaching is I literally put in my notice and I said, I need to do this full time. And lo and behold, COVID kind of helped me on that because COVID came in about, soon thereafter. And that's when we were on lockdown anyway. So I was like, well, hell, this was meant to be.
I love it. And, it's funny, jump and the net will appear.
Yeah. Like literally there will. And I know that I talked on the TC and, they encourage everyone, definitely think about things, have a backup plan, which we're definitely saying that, make sure, you have finances in order, but I'm learning to be much more open. And I will be honest, my finances were not in order. I was not ready, but I had to be ready and I had to make it the time because that was not serving me anymore. It was actually making so much about my life much worse. And so when it comes to that, you really have to weigh out those pros and cons and say, okay, what is this giving versus what is this taking? And when those scales are tipped the wrong way, well, then you know what? You have to dive. You just need to jump and then be prepared to do the effing work that's going to be entailed to make sure that you are okay and can put food on your table.
Yeah, absolutely. And then the crazy part of it is that people think like I was a little bit jaded. I thought that I would have more free time when I became self-employed, which is totally wrong. Now
Right.
it's like every spare minute is like this, or like I just took Jeff Sue's cycle syncing class. Like it's constant, trying to better yourself and better your offerings and all that stuff. So super, super busy. But the thing is you have to consider, and this is kind of where I came to, and maybe you came to a similar place. It was like, okay, I am losing my health here. It's really bad. And I don't want to die early. Like, I don't want something to happen to me where I become ill because of all this or even worse. And so I decided to just jump because I knew at that point when I was looking at people that were working at McDonald's and I was like, man, I wonder if their job is less stressful. I knew it was the time that I needed to take care of my health. And that may have come with the ramifications of not having money to do this or that. But I had to take care of my health and I couldn't just be like, well, my health is bad because of my job anymore. I couldn't make that excuse because if I was letting that be an excuse, then I was
Yes.
allowing that to happen.
Yes. It's funny. So that was one of, I guess, like those mantras that I I always say to myself and I say to my clients and my husband and I say to each other is, if we complain about something twice, we have to change it. Then literally what are you doing? If you're constantly saying, oh, I live in this place, the weather sucks. Okay, well, let's start working to do something about it. Granted, you can't necessarily just quit your job and move, however, you can start taking the necessary steps to do that. And I realized that I was starting to feel like more of a hypocrite inside because I wasn't living the life and I wasn't living to my potential. And I felt like I was honestly at that point holding myself back. I wasn't leveling up. I was playing it safe. And in order for me to really level up, I said, okay, well, this is going to mean that, I definitely don't live above my means at all, but this is going to mean we're going to have to tighten it up. I'm going to have to work even harder, take every free course I possibly can. And that's, a lot of coaches say, oh, well, this costs, NCI is this, and this class is that. Okay, so fine. I do an envelope system, honest to God. I get online, any course I can get for free. If it says it's $10, I do it. Like we have coaches here that put on courses that's like $50. I'm like, let me sign up. Let me learn from you because I think actually I posted this yesterday is I have been really fortunate with the community of coaches that I have met is that everybody wants everybody to succeed. And I think it's really cool because nobody is like, oh, well, I'm going to be the best coach and I don't want to tell anybody my tricks and the secret sauce because we all know there is no secret sauce. And that tells me that I'm in the right community because we are all pushing each other to level up, to do more, to try to talk more, to, just really educate ourselves.
I love that. And I love that you posted that because it's really great. This like coaching community that's growing all of a sudden that we're kind of in. And I know
Yeah.
you guys scare the shit out of me. I'm not going to lie. Like, but then when we're all talking, like we're all on this clubhouse chat or something like that, I'm like, you're talking and I'm like, yeah, I agree with that. Yeah, I agree with that. I agree with that. So sometimes we hold ourselves back too and we have knowledge, but then we're just like, no, I'm not as good as this person, but it's so great. Like, so many coaches that I have recently come into contact with, we all support each other. Like the other day, I was asking someone about their client intakes because I was like, I feel like I forgot something here. I'm missing something and I know I am and I can't quite figure out what it is. And that person reached right out and they helped me out and they're like, no, I would add this, or let me send you what I do.
Yeah.
And it's so cool because we're not taking each other's clients ever. Like we're trying to help each other be better coaches and it's so awesome.
Yeah, for sure. For sure. And I would say that's when, for me, that's when things came full throttle for me is when I was able to actually show up as my authentic self, and start leveling up that's when I could really reach out and help others even more. Understanding we're never done. Like that's for sure. My knowledge base is, I know you feel the same. My knowledge base is nowhere near where I want it to be. And I feel like it should be. And I think that's a darn good thing. I would hate to feel like I've arrived.
Mm-hmm. Oh, absolutely. I know I took Jeff's course the other day and we were doing our open Q&A and he's like, I don't care if it's related to the course, but have at it, And I was like, well, I'll tell you what I got going on. I got a girl 2 weeks out from a show. Here's what I'm doing. What do you think? Because especially when, some of these people have been doing this for like 20 years, they're masters at it. They've seen everything, for us that are just starting out, it doesn't mean we're any less, but we don't have the experience and nothing out there is going to get us there aside from just, I hate to say it this way, using people as our guinea pigs, but Austin says it that way. He's like, hey, I'm so fortunate people have let me have been my guinea pigs, but, really, being able to ask questions and have him be like, no, I think you're doing this right. And I think you're on the right track. I would maybe change this a little bit. And just so willing to help out with things and say his reasoning why and what was just so freaking cool.
Yeah. It's that validation that okay, well, shit, I am on the right track. And that crazy thought in my brain, I'm like, okay, well, I do know this, and as I want to say individual like entrepreneurs, because we all, basically are single coaches here. You don't have that office camaraderie or anything like that. You are literally sitting in, number one, it's not as glamorous as what people think on Instagram, where you have like you're drinking this cup of coffee, your hair is all blown out, you got your like honest to God, I have a picture I probably should post, but it has like my husband took it and it has like literally a heating pad around my neck, like it was like haggard, just like fucking haggard, and I'm like, but that's actually how I am on the daily basis,
Oh, yeah. My husband was making fun of my notes the other day. I have a dedicated journal to when clients check in, and I literally just sit there and take notes the whole time because I just feel like I can't miss anything and I need to be able to revisit it. And sometimes when you're talking, it's so easy for things to get lost. And I literally wake up at 4 a.m. and start working on client stuff. And I've got my coffee and I've got all these notes and there's paperwork everywhere. And it's kind of a hot mess, but it works and I love doing it.
Yeah, exactly. And that's how, we're doing it for the right reasons. And I know that me looking back, as far as hygiene, I don't regret making that decision. If anything, I think, I mean, my decision was overdue. It was overdue by probably about 5 years. But I mean, can't go back and say, oh, I wish I did. It's just literally showing up every day to be better than you were yesterday, serve more, do more. And if you can say you did that, then I feel like, you're a success for sure.
Love it. Love all of it. Well, we got off on a tangent there, but I think it's great things for other people to hear. But let's talk about your story a little bit. What got you down into this rabbit hole? Like, I mean, you were in dentistry and then all of a sudden, boom, you're interested in this stuff.
Yeah. So I think as with most coaches, it came with what was going on with myself. As a woman, I was, put on, I had an irregular period for a very long time, and I was put on birth control to solve that because apparently that's what that does. I'm being sarcastic in case folks don't know. And I probably was on about 7 different, birth controls. I started having issues where they, found benign tumors growing on my ovaries. For people who don't know, I was blessed enough to um, start actually having a condition what's called ovarian torsions, where my ovaries would twist on themselves, and that does require hospitalization. I dealt with that for years, and obviously understanding what just trauma on the body of an organ twisting. I mean, we could go down rabbit holes there about what that does. We're not just talking about hormones at that point, but I had a lot of hormonal, I don't want to say issues, but I just had hormonal stuff going on that I didn't really know what was going on. But my kind of breaking point, which I've said before, is when I had an ovarian torsion. I was in the middle of prep. I kept prepping because I didn't know any better. That's what we do. And I started gaining weight rather than losing weight. I ended up having to have that ovary removed, and all this time I had, I was the weekend and nighttime educator. So I'd get home from work after training and after working in hygiene, and I just dove into research and dove into learning. And that's when I was like, okay, what I'm doing right now is not working. And there's more it meets the eye. And that's when I reached out to my coach, Jason Theobald, and started talking to him about what I knew and what was going on with myself. And I want to say that was the moment where I decided to actually change my actions, and make my actions line up to the education that I had actually been doing. And, and that was hard. That obviously required me to stop dieting and do everything that is completely, counterintuitive to what you think, especially when you're miserable in your body. But I definitely had to do that, and I would say that was the beginning for me. Obviously that was years of what I was saying led up to that. I mean, starting, you figure, whenever I started menstruating and as a teenager, and then my first being put on birth control probably around probably like 16 or 17 years old, which is late compared to some people now. and then just dealing with kind of my hormonal journey up until most recently. I'm actually in surgical menopause, where they did have to remove my final ovary. It came down to quality of life. Um, my first ovary, when it was removed, I had probably over 10 ovarian torsions, and at least 3 to 4 surgeries on just that one ovary. And that's when they said, okay, let's be done with this. This is not quality. Every time I would ovulate or go to have a period, I'd be in the hospital. Like, that's not, you can't live like that. So after the first ovary was removed, I made it almost exactly 12 months. I made it 11. And then my final ovary went into a triple torsion. And once it did it once, we knew what I was set up for. We knew that this was now going to continue. So by that point, I had already dove into the research. I knew I only had one ovary left. My body had started to change. I started to have, just a little bit of cognition, brain fog, just things I knew were off. And understanding that I only had one ovary, I knew that I would enter perimenopause very much quicker than I would if I had, 2 functioning ovaries. And then I said to myself, I'm a preparer. I like to be prepared. And so I said, okay, listen, what happens if you lose your last one? You need to be prepared for that. And luckily I was. So when that happened, and we had to make the decision for my final ovary to come out, that's when I dove into the world of, HRT and menopause and what that looks like, because it was scary. There was no one around me who had been through anything that I had been through. And I knew that a woman in my 30s, I wanted to be vital, and I wanted to have zest, and I wanted to live an amazing life. I want to be the Betty White. And so, yeah, it was a pretty big emotional journey, because nothing when it comes to hormones is fast. And we are a fast society wanting instant results, and that's not the way it is. Especially in hormones, a lot of it is tinker with this and wait and see, tinker with that and wait and see. And then just the accessibility of information. There's just so much that we don't know about women's health overall. And that, depending on what practitioner you find, you're gonna, it's gonna be either a taboo subject, or, they're gonna just not be educated themselves. So it was definitely a lot of self-education, this entire process, for sure.
But that's really great that you dove into all of that and started to learn and understand it, because I think that's a really big flaw in our society now, is people trust others too much with their health. And if their doctor says this or that, it's like word, and we don't ever pursue it further. And I can't tell you how many people I have run across where they're like, well, my doctor said this. And I'm like, okay, well, I'm not a doctor, but I'm looking at your labs and it says that this is wrong. Like, find a different doctor, find a different practitioner that will look at this a little closer. And yeah, it's a really crazy thing, and I'm glad that you invested time into understanding things, because I think that we as a population should be doing that a little bit more.
Oh yeah, definitely. It's funny, like, those are some of the things that kind of, again, just kind of pushed me, because I was tired of hearing, being at work, I was tired of hearing people give really shitty advice to people, especially with nutrition, telling them, eliminate all salt from your diet, stop, don't eat any carbs, like, just the stuff you always hear. And I was like, you know what, we can do better. I can do
Yeah.
better.
Yeah.
And I think, if anything, before, I was very nervous about sharing my journey and sharing things, because it's a lot, when you start, getting into that, and then a number of surgeries and all this stuff. But then I realized, if I can share what I've been through with, dermoids and tumors and twists and, precancerous cells, and ultimately, like, literally every single thing, birth control to now I'm in menopause. If I can share my knowledge and my experience with somebody else, and ultimately, I think I'd love to be able to help the people that aren't there yet and make better choices, while they still can have a a profound impact on their future. Number one, you can always make an impact. There's no better time than the present. So age is not, if you're 70 years old, you can still do something. But I think, talking to the, girls that are in their, teens and 20s and telling them, hey, guess what, around 25, things peak up to 25 years old, and then you're going to start changing. From there, we're going to start declining a bit here. And guess what? In like 5 years, you're technically in a potential period of perimenopause, and things are going to change. And how are you setting yourself up for that? I'm not telling you can't prep. I'm not telling you can't diet, but let's be educated and let's be smart and let's make sure that we're taking care of our adrenals, taking care, making sure we're having a cycle, because that shit's going to matter. And it sucks when you enter a period of life and you're entering from rock bottom. Like that sucks. I've been there and it is awful.
Absolutely. And I do want to kind of touch on that. And I'm sure we'll get to talk about all this further, but that's one thing that young girls don't realize. They go into the doctor, like when they're 13, it's like the first time I don't know how it is in Canada, but they go into the doctor here and they are pushing birth control so hard. Like, and you think of the communities out there that are like against supplementing with hormones, performance enhancing drugs, all these things. And they're like, oh, well, that's a hormone and that's illegal. And you non-natty person. And they're getting mad at these people. What they don't realize is birth control has an equal impact. It's the same shit.
Steroid.
It's the same stuff. Like, just because it's legal in your doctor's.
I know. I'm like, okay. You're on steroids.
Yeah. And so people are all afraid that you're going to get hurt by doing performance enhancing drugs, these things, but they're doing them every single day and they don't realize it. And it is impacting them for a lifetime. Like anytime you start turning off hormones and turning on hormones, you are impacting things heavily. And these girls don't get educated on that.
Yeah. And it's, what, like you touched on a really good point. And something that somebody asked actually Jason once is when, and it's such a generic question, but when would you recommend somebody to, start considering performance enhancing drugs? And his recommendation was like, honestly, like way past, like in your 25, 30, 35, he said, maximize your potential. And that's the thing is, if you think about it, what are we doing to our young girls by putting them on these hormones at 12 and 13 years old? You're manipulating their brain. You're manipulating their brain chemistry at that young of an age. That's profound. Like that's intense. I mean, that can literally steer a girl into, having anxiety, having depression, having these crazy things, and understanding that you're putting her on birth control because her body is waking up as a woman. Yes, it sucks to be bleeding heavy. Cramping sucks. But you know what? Those estrogen receptors, it's almost like baby cells opening up and just blooming. And okay, let's help her with that. Let's talk to her about her diet. Let's, do the free things that we can do and mitigate these a little bit more naturally rather than shutting her off,
Yeah, I agree 100% here. And that's an unfortunate part of our system, right? It's nothing is root cause. And I'm hoping it's going there. I mean, you're hearing more and more buzzwords about finding out the root of the problem. But for the most part, it's like, let's just turn this off. Like, let's stick a lemon in the tailpipe of the smoking car. Who cares what happens to the car later? It might blow up, but I mean, no problem. Just cover it up.
Yeah. That's actually, it's almost like you're just shoving all the shit in a closet door, and you'll deal with it in 20 years when you have to open the closet and all the shit starts tumbling out. That's when all of a sudden you want to clean it all up. And let me tell you, that's not going to be a fun job, because that's when all the spiders and cockroaches are going to start crawling out of things. Like, open up the closet door and handle it. That being said, I do want to say there's a caveat. Is there a time and a place for birth control and things like that? Yes, of course, but not just to throw band-aids at it. It's like, for example, a woman coming in who's in, perimenopause and, throwing an antidepressant at her. Now, yes, again, there is a time and a place for that, but here again, she might be able to be helped in another way other than that.
Yeah, absolutely. And I mean, we can go down that rabbit hole. You and I both are like totally on the HRT wagon. I know for myself, I suffer from really low testosterone, and I like to keep it, at a higher level. I work with my doctor on that, and I've experimented with it at many levels, and I know where I feel good at. And it's not, there is a quality of life portion there, right? So you can be as afraid of hormones as you want, but if you can get on hormones that make you feel optimized
Yeah.
or optimize your longevity, then by all means, get somebody in there that understands this stuff and can help you with it.
Yeah. And again, I think it comes down to understanding that, as with anything, there is a type of, and perhaps even a mode of hormone that is going to be best for you. And just because, you know, your husband's golf buddy said, "Hey, my wife's on the pellet, you need to be on the pellet too," maybe not the best choice. I'm just going to say I'm not an uber big fan of the pellet. I'll caveat that by maybe it is okay for somebody, but in my experience, anecdotal experience, I do not have it, have never tried it. Any client who I have had come in on the pellet, their testosterone is kicking past what some of the bodybuilders I've seen. And unfortunately, some of the clinics that are doing these, quick, I'm going to call them quick fixes, I'll pop this in you and then you come back in 3 months. They are getting a kickback. You need to understand that company is getting a kickback, but they're not running labs. I had a client where she was getting the pellet and I said, "Okay, listen, before you get another pellet, you need to have labs run. What if you don't need that pellet?" And the whole thing is they wouldn't run labs. They said they ran them afterwards. And you can't do that. And that's just, you're setting yourself up for a complete shit show. I know it takes trial and error. I know it takes time, but by God, your life is worth it. Find a good practitioner. Don't do what Jane said, at the carpool line. Go invest in a practitioner that is going to individualize your health.
Absolutely. If your practitioner isn't running labs, and like, people can reach out to me, they can reach out to you. If they want a list, we'd be happy to give them one. If your practitioner is not running labs, you need to find a different practitioner, because you cannot manage what you don't measure.
Yeah.
You can't
For
do it.
any age.
Like,
Would you feel that I would say any age. If you are
yeah.
man or woman, I personally feel if you are, adolescent, understand this with lab work, there is going to be ranges of lab work always, and fluctuations of lab work. And depending on how old you are is depending on where lab work should look. So a woman or a gentleman who is, say, 15, 17 years old, so yeah, if you're 15 or 17-year-old kid to, if you're 65-year-old, you should get a full workup. It's okay to get some lab work done. Here again, understanding that your sex hormones are going to be affected by other things. What if there's, again, an autoimmune, Hashimoto's going on? Going back to adrenals, which are huge, what happens with there? And we see that a lot, especially in, I want to say, like teenager, 20, college age. We see a lot when it comes to cortisol levels, just because of what they're dealing with. There's a lot of things going on there, and that is going to affect reproductive hormones, sex hormones. So it's really important. And I think that it's doing your due diligence practitioner that is willing to listen.
Yeah, absolutely. And you said something back there that I want to reverse on, and that was that um it is so variable between people. Like, so what works for you or what works for me or your brother is going to be so different. And it's going to be different in so many ways, whether it's your hormones, whether it's the food you're eating or the kind of dieting you're doing. And so sometimes, like, you can hire a coach or somebody to help you. It may take them a while to figure out what's going on and to kind of dig into things too. You're not necessarily going to get overnight success.
100%. And even going on to that, it's interesting what cleaning up certain things, and I say that like very broadly, But getting a handle and cleaning up certain things of a client's, health, especially gut health, starting with gut health, you'd be surprised. I know from most of my clients, I don't touch hormones. I make no suggestions with hormones out of the gate. I'm looking at gut health, because if gut health is off, well, that is going to be off. We don't need to be throwing all these things, chase bear, all these things. If honestly, I've seen it where I clean the gut up, and I'm not gonna say magic because we know why, but everything starts turning back on. Somebody says something that your gut is nothing more than, it's the same brain tissue, it's just a couple feet lower, and it's the same. That is what they call it, the second brain. And so much comes down to that when it comes to conversion of hormones, when it comes to excretion, because again, gut is not just what you think of as stomach. It is going into liver, it's going into gallbladder, it's going into small, large intestine. Yes, we're going to then talk about the stomach, and then excreting things out. So it's a whole system. So getting that on track is part of your hormonal health, and understand your hormonal health. All of that, everything you can think of, comes down to your brain health. Leaky brain, everything, whether your sex hormones, whether it's your adrenal glands, your thyroid, which again, thyroid is very, very, very rarely, the cause. It is very rarely the root. It is generally the outcome, the effect of something else. And you have to go back to what's going on with the brain. What is your brain? Your hypothalamic pituitary axis, which goes HP thyroid, HB gonads, whether that's your testes, your ovaries, HB adrenal. And understand that HB, with those branches I just said, are all going to have a feedback loop. So if your adrenal glands are like, fuck off, dude, because they're way too stressed out, well, then that's going to feed back to your brain, going to affect your thyroid, going to affect your sex hormones. And again, for the younger, athletes, that's going to be huge when you have that athlete getting up, at 4 a.m., whether they're a swimmer, basketball player, dancer, they're getting up, they're doing a practice in the morning, whether they're hitting the pool, then they're going to school, doing school, and then they have, weight training in the afternoon, then they're going here, there, and all the places. Or you have the person in their 30s and 40s who they're, a career person, they're trying to lose weight. You really have to think about that adrenal piece, because that's going to really dictate so much, especially if you're entering that, andropause for men, or menopause, peri time for women. That's going to be huge, because those adrenals are going to really take care of your sex hormones, because as your gonads lessen production, as they should, you're not deficient, they are lessening, and that's what should happen. Your adrenals are going to start taking over, and that's not their main gig. Their main gig is not to shoot out, testosterone and, all these things to help you, survive. That is, a secondary thing, putting out DHEA and things like that. So looking at how we take care of ourselves and being the smart humans and smart athletes now, regardless of what age you are, sets you up for how it's going to be in 5 years, in 10 years.
Yeah, 100. I love all of that. I can't even tell you how much I love it. Like seriously. And that's the thing, is people don't understand stress is a huge, it's almost worse than sugar, or maybe even worse than sugar, and all of these other things that people like to blame on their illnesses. Stress is like the number one thing that causes all of the shit to hit the fan.
Yes,
And like
100%.
stress stops your digestion, it stops your hormonal production, it stops all of these other processes in your brain. And I have clients that are stressed out, and they think they need to go do all these other things to try to like help themselves. And I'm like, no, the only thing I care about right now is stress, because it is the number one.
Yeah, for sure. And I think you touched on something big, is, when it comes down to dealing with our stress, understand that it's the easy stuff that nobody wants to do, because it seems so tedious. Everybody feels that they can do the extreme. If it's like they're going to start working out, all of a sudden they're going to get up at 4:30 in the morning, and I'm going to go take like 3, whatever body pump classes in a row. And then I'm going to go do a cycle spin for like 3 hours. And I'm literally over here saying, okay, listen, let's just eat food, with protein in it, like every 3 to 4 hours. And I'm going to ask you to set a bedtime. and let's, make sure that, digestion is happening, and that in order for digestion is happening, that you're not wolfing down food. You actually sit down. It doesn't take that long to eat. Let's be real, folks. It honest to God takes, they say take 20 minutes to eat. I don't know what size meal you're eating. It doesn't take 20 minutes to eat a meal. However, to sit down, take a couple breaths, chew your food slowly. Honest to God, you can eat a normal sized meal in probably like 5 to 10 minutes while putting your fork down and chewing. And that, as you said, is going to help digestion. It's going to help. That digestion is not happening, then hormones are not going to be, we're not going to be talking about filtering out estrogens and things like that. Things are going to be recirculated through the body. So it's coming down to those small, simple foundations that are boring. It's the boring stuff that is the easiest thing that nobody wants to do, because it's not glamorous. It's not like, I'm not putting a squeam on. I'm not, rubbing this liquid on my stomach to make, a vasodilation happening. There's no secret sauce. It's the free stuff that nobody wants to do. Get off social media at night, go to bed, put down the alcohol, because that alcohol is going to increase your estrogen. If you're not detoxifying your estrogen, well, then congratulations. Now you have even more. It's going to increase your risk for cardiovascular disease, breast cancer. You're worried about going on HRT and getting breast cancer? Put down the alcohol. That's going to increase odds for breast cancer.
Listen, I love all of this because it's so, so true. I mean, like today I had a client that I was onboarding, and they were doing magic shakes basically for weight loss. And I was like, listen, why are we investing so much money that we don't have into these things that are not getting you there when there are so many things you can do for free? So I really love that you touched on that. So let's talk about this a little bit more with your story. I kind of want to reverse a bit here because you were kind of forced into menopause.
100%.
And a lot of women find themselves in that position, and they say, oh, don't worry, we're taking all this out. It won't affect you at all. And then here they are later down the road, they're gaining weight, they're having all of these other things, brain fog, not to mention hormonal fluctuations and stuff like that. So what do you recommend is the first thing somebody does when this happens, and how can they start to get all this stuff straight in such a convoluted medical system?
Yeah. Number one, if anybody is dismissive of you, walk away. When I first had to actually reach out and say, I need a practitioner for, to consider HRT, because you need to understand that HRT is simply making sure that your hormone levels are optimal for function. We're not going to super physiological levels here. We're not, pumping things very high. It is literally to make sure you're safe. Estrogen protects you. It protects your arteries. It keeps them gushy, soft. So when it comes to, arterial sclerosis, risking heart attack, risking stroke, if you are quote low in estrogen. And I'm gonna say that at any place, whether you are in your 20s, your 40s, your 50s. So going into perimenopause or into even an andropause for men, you really want to make sure that your hormones are optimized for you, understanding something that, Connie, like you said earlier, your levels and my levels are going to be totally different, and they should be. We're not looking for, there's a range-ish on paper, but understanding that if somebody feels a certain way and we know that they're protected, that's the big thing, is if you tell me that, you're 100 pounds overweight and we have all these things, well, okay, well, whoa, we got some things that we got some issues, and you tell me you feel good, we're gonna talk. But if looking at labs, if we're in this range and things are good, and you tell me your symptoms, you're feeling better, we're right track, but coming into, perimenopause, it's most of the time, and even, that andropause time is when you start getting the misdiagnoses of, anxiety, depression, fibromyalgia, all these things. And understand during this time too, that's when a lot of autoimmune diseases start to arise. There's several times in a woman's life, but I would say a man's life, this is going to be around that time too, because there is going to be a declining of hormones. For a woman, it's going to be during puberty. It's going to be, pregnancy, postpartum, and then during this perimenopause, menopause time, because again, your hormones are protective. And so we got to think immune function, think of your adrenal, again, when I said immune function. So if your estrogen is too low, you are going to be at the risk for, heart attack, stroke, diabetes, because again, going back to when you were actually cycling, remember estrogen is going to make you insulin sensitive. So it means that you are sensitive to insulin. Insulin can be utilized well to take glucose and put it into the cell. If you are not insulin sensitive, that's when it's going to be pre-diabetes, diabetes, and we're going to have issues with buildup there. So estrogen helps that. Estrogen's good for that. So if we have that declining, well, then we're going to be into also risk factors of diabetes. Brain health. Again, think about what I said about the arteries and keeping everything gushy good. Again, that's going to go into brain health. So if you have a decline in hormones, you're going to be at a more heightened risk for dementia, Alzheimer's, and then go into your genetics. Do you have even more predisposition for that? Because there is something, epigenetics, you can improve that, and it again comes back to your habits. So for somebody who is having these perimenopause, andropause symptoms where you might be having a decline in the afternoon, or you're having these fluctuations of depression, anxiety, and moods all over the place, or rage, understand that that time is not the time necessarily to be going and saying, I'm going to be on, anti-anxiety medication and things like that. You might need to start getting into like some cycle mapping and seeing where your hormones are at what times. Even for my men, looking at your testosterone, looking at your estrogen, and I want to say even more so for both parties, looking at those adrenal glands, because again, during these times of high stress, and when your body's really fighting things, that's when we also see a decline in that production of cortisol, because it's been outputting so much. So we see that adaptation. So one of the biggest things I would suggest for somebody is, if you start having symptoms, one, start tracking them. Start tracking your symptoms. For a woman, if you are still cycling and having a period, I definitely suggest tracking your cycle. How long is your cycle? Like, how many days are you from your first bleed to your next bleed, as well as how long is your bleed? Because what you'll start seeing happening is perhaps a lowering of progesterone, which would be a longer follicular phase. Okay, so you might see that kind of getting longer, and then unfortunately, then you'll also see it getting even shorter. And so seeing those fluctuations might lead you to believe, okay, I might be in this perimenopausal time. And at that time, it is so important to get on top of those low-hanging fruits when it comes to stress reduction, your circle of 5 who surrounds you, and your boundaries. It's really important, because nobody is going to serve you and stand up to show up for you other than yourself. People can support you, but understand that you're the only one that can really show up and do the work.
That's so great you said that. And also, that's a big thing, and you probably get it too, where women are like, yeah, well, I do want to change my diet, but my husband doesn't. And I say, well, listen, sister, sometimes you got to put your oxygen mask on before you can help anybody else. And it's
all
very
the time.
important. Yeah, like, it's very important that you take care of yourself. And like, sometimes that may not look like eating the same food that you're eating with your spouse or your family. That may look like being a change. If that's all you can control, you got to control it. And I do want to reverse to just one thing that you said. You said someone might be 100 pounds and they're like, well, I feel great. Well, I hear that all the time from people. Let's just use gluten as an example. They're like, well, I eat a lot of gluten, but I feel great. But a lot of these people don't realize how crappy they actually feel until they start removing the offenders from their life.
Yeah. And it's interesting. Gluten's a big one for many different areas, whether again, okay, understand everything's connected. Like there's no doors in the body that they shuts it off and it's only the gut. It's kind of going back to dentistry. There's not a trap door at the mouth and like everything else is not connected. So same thing with your body. So with gluten, it's interesting because that will affect as far as estrogen too. So I believe I read somewhere that, celiac and even gluten intolerance, you are going to really have to be careful here again with your hormones, because it's going to be directly affected. And obviously we can talk about thyroid because yes, it's going to be mimicking there as well. We can get into, was it gogatrogans and food and making sure you cook things. But bottom line, I think that a lot of people, number one, we do change over time. And so you might have been able to handle gluten and handle dairy at certain times, but it doesn't mean necessarily that it's really serving you now. And understand, like, even with the dairy thing, that most people, gluten included, we do have a threshold and everybody has a different threshold. So if you're not celiac, you might be able to handle a certain threshold of gluten and say your day. But I, even say, hey, why even tinker that? You might feel even better if you avoided gluten. Understanding avoiding gluten does not meaning avoiding carbs. That is
Yeah.
very different.
Well, I mean, yeah, gluten-free bread,
Yeah.
I mean, seriously though, like there are so many different things available to people that don't have gluten in them now. And not to get in this gluten rabbit hole, but like, for example, I met with somebody the other day and they were like, hey, well, I had a food intolerance test taken and they said I was fine with gluten. And I said, but
Oh,
how well are you digesting that
yeah,
gluten? How well are you,
exactly.
like, it may not, it may be looking at that intolerant, like the allergy portion of
Yeah.
it, but it's not looking at how your body handles it. And so that's when, these other things need to be taken into consideration. It's not if you're allergic to it, there's a lot of other things involved.
Yeah. Well, it's like with alcohol. Okay, so you have a couple glasses of wine of alcohol, and you say you feel fine. Okay, well that's great. I'm happy for you, but it doesn't negate what it's actually doing in your body, and I'm really sorry for that. But it's the fact. I definitely feel like some people probably can handle a threshold of gluten. I do feel that as we age with as adults, understanding that you're always aging by the time you're born. Um, I do feel like a lot of people's threshold for certain things such as gluten and lactose does decline. That's my anecdotal what I've noticed. Most folks, who don't have a full blown, gluten sensitivity and tolerance, might be able to handle something of gluten, in their day. But for the most part, most people feel better avoiding something like that, and as well avoiding dairy.
Yeah. Yeah. So anyway, I know that we were talking about hormones, but I just wanted to get back to
Yeah,
that feel good thing because I hear that all the time. Well, I eat this and I just feel fine. And it's like, well, you don't realize. And my husband and I, before we changed our diets, we didn't realize how unfine we actually were until we started eating real food and whole things
exactly.
that we knew exactly what they were. And then all of a sudden it was like, oh, my joint pain is gone. Oh, that nagging little backache that I thought was from lifting too much
Yeah.
weight is gone. Oh, this and that is gone. Oh, the knee pain's gone. Like there was all sorts of things that was
My
like,
phlegm is gone.
yeah,
Yeah.
exactly. So anyway, off on that segue there. But so postmenopausal dieting, let's jump
Yeah.
into that.
Yeah, for
That
sure.
is so, it can be very complicated for some women. They're like, I
Yeah.
went through the change, now I can't keep the weight off.
Yeah, for sure. Number one, I'm going to say again, look at what you're eating, look at your stress level, look at your sleeping. You can get the weight off. It again, understanding how the body works, we have to make sure that those adrenals are safe and good. And that's what I generally see the most problem with. A lot of people feel as soon as someone hits menopause, they're like, oh, well, their hormones are gone. I can, literally run them into the ground. And I'm like, well, no, because they might already be in the ground. And that may be the reason that they're not able to get the weight off because, their adrenals have adapted. Also, when it comes to women who are going into that, menopausal time, I do know that you can diet, but it's with anything, you have to be set up for it. I find that a lot of women and men, They are drinking, as far as like more calories from, alcohol than they're actually eating a regular food. Um, when it comes to your appetite, that is going to change, when your hormones change, and even the foods that you like and the foods that you want to have. You can very much diet being menopausal or, into, your seniors as a gentleman, but it is as with any age, you need to be set up for that. If you are already low, then like I have a client right now who, I mean, she was eating maybe like 1,000 calories and overweight. So I told her, I was like, we need to get calories up. We're going to reverse you and we're going to hang out there. And there's nothing, more horrible than I'm reversing her up. And, obviously we know what happens. Stress goes down and, the weight's coming off. And then now we're at a standstill. We're at a stall. Well, I'm not going to drop your calories now. Like that is literally yo-yo dieting, So we are going to hang out where we are. We're going to get stronger. Look at our strength, because that is huge too, is as we age, we need to make sure we're strength training. We need to make sure we're eating enough. The types of food for menopausal women, that might change. You might not to be able to handle, 300 grams of carbs, but I can't put any blanket statements out there because I know people who do. So it comes down to, again, it is going to be the individual. So there should be no blanket statements. You enter menopause and this is how you're dieted. You enter menopause and, this is how, you're fed up. It is still individual.
Absolutely. And like even when people are starting to go through menopause and they're in perimenopause, they start seeing these changes. They feel like they're gaining weight more easily. What are some of the things that they can do to start helping themselves? Like we talked about pretty much all of these, but just to kind of reiterate it, we talked
Yeah.
about stress, we talked about eating real foods. I mean, are there other things that women can do to optimize when they start getting to this stage?
I'm going to say do a life audit. Do a life audit of what your habits are throughout the day. Are you picking? Are you doing BLTs? I think doing an audit of your day, doing an audit of your habits, meaning are you somebody that is peer pressure into doing things perhaps that you don't want to do? Do you have boundaries? Those are going to be really, really important. Being consistent. So having boundaries, being consistent every single day, and doing audits. I think that is the most important, and understanding that doing audits and having boundaries is going to be consistency as well. Don't look for an easy, it's not the celery juice, it's not the apple cider vinegar, it's not take the vitamin E. Yes, these are all really awesome things, but there is no one answer. And I think that everybody is looking for the secret sauce. I'm in menopause. This is what I need to do. Well, to be frank, it doesn't change from when you were in your 20s or 30s. It's still going to be individual. But bottom line, it's going to come down to consistency. Maybe stop dieting and stop over cardioing, because again, understanding during menopause, your ovary production has declined as far as it should, and your adrenals have taken over. Your adrenals are not responsible. They're responsible for that stress, the immunity, and these things. And so if you're going to be under eating, over cardioing, and also, the body pump classes, I don't want to slap them. They're wonderful because I want people to move. Yes. And I want people to be, more mobile. I get it. But understand it's not the same as strength training. If you are bouncing around, doing Zumba, I love it. I love that for you. But understand it is not the same as strength training. And that is going to yield way more than any type of running, elliptical, it's not about getting my heart rate up as high as it can for as long as it can, sweating to where I'm literally, shedding layers of clothing. That is not the definition of success in dieting in any age, especially in menopause or andropause.
Oh my gosh, I love everything you said there. I am so on that train. I tell people that constantly. I'm like, it's
I don't
not
want to bash
about
on those things. I feel
no.
bad, but like, you know,
I'm happy when I see people moving their body. Our body is a
yes,
gift. We should move it. When I see people out in the sun and they're walking their dogs and running with their kids and doing all these things,
love
I'm
it.
happy about it. It makes me happy. But there has to be a certain amount of other things incorporated. And I feel like a lot of the reasons people do some of these classes is because they're trying to like abuse their body into a certain shape.
Burn fat. I think it's that
Yeah.
whole burn. I gotta burn fat. And my God, you are gonna quote number one, you can't, it doesn't like just zap the cell. Let's understand that. Like you have these fat cells, they get smaller, they get larger, they get smaller, they get larger, and they multiply, but you don't zap them. Like, I mean, that is a surgical procedure, right? So lift some weights, man.
And that burns calories all day long, not just when
Yes,
you're jumping
way
around.
longer.
And you're not going to get osteoporosis when you're older. Like there's a lot of
Exactly.
really important things there. But yeah, no, I totally agree that the over cardioing is contributing to the major stress pandemic that we are living in already. And all of these programs that are out there, beach body, body pump, cardio, whatever, are actually contributing to all of these people's adrenal problems, and so many people are suffering with major adrenal slowdown
Yes.
and thyroid problems and all these things. It's because we as a society go way too hard.
Yeah, I mean, it even goes into the same thing with going too hard. It's like the extremes. We are fine to go to the extremes, but I said this yesterday, everyone can be 0, everybody can be 100, but why is it 0 or 100? Like, why can't we be consistent? I just don't get that, you know? And we're sitting here trying to constantly be smaller humans. You know, I want to weigh less. No, you don't. That's not going to give you the body you want. Shocker, the body you want has way more muscle on it than you really think. And newsflash, myself included, you have way less muscle than you actually think. You know, if you really want to see what your lean body mass is, it is a harsh reality, especially for folks who actually are doing strength training. It's quite a blow to the ego when you get really lean. You're like, this is it. This is all I have. It is so hard to put on muscle. It's hard to keep muscle. And as we age, number one, if your hormones are not in a good place, you're going to lose that because your hormones are responsible for protecting you. And here again, if we're not doing strength training and we're not, quote, exercising these muscles, you're going to lose them. It's just like your brain function. You have to exercise your brain function in order to keep it. And just being really good at cardio, I get it. If you are a cardiovascular athlete and that is your goal, then rock on. But understand that in order to be really perhaps efficient at being a cardiovascular athlete, you're going to need some muscle to push that body forward.
Yeah, absolutely. I'm always excuse me, I'm always stuck in this spot because I love to cycle. I'm like big into cycling. And I have to back myself off and not like I like to race. I want to go do 120-mile races. I want to do all the cardio in the world because I like to do it. But I try to focus most of my stuff on strength training because I also have adrenal problems from my bodybuilding career. And I have to make sure that I don't like get those things going again with, with doing all the crazy cardio. So it's
You
very
fuel
hard to balance
yourself
sometimes.
well,
Yeah.
but you fuel yourself well. That's the big thing is if it'd be one thing, if somebody, if you're doing these races and something like that, and you're not actually fueling yourself and you're eating, 100, 1,000 calories a day or 1,200 calories a day. I mean, that's what I'm seeing a lot of is, the folks that are getting stuck at these sub-caloric levels, and understand that as we age does not mean that necessarily your calories have to decrease that much.
Well, and our body, for the most part, is a pretty adaptive being. So it likes to find homeostasis in places, and it will find homeostasis in places where you put it. You want to put it at 1,200 calories, it's going to find homeostasis at, at the ramifications of other processes, but it's going to find homeostasis there. Like for myself, I am a very active person, but I eat a lot of food, like a lot of food. Sometimes I get sick of eating food. Well, that might be a little bit of a stretch, but like I can put down a lot of calories. And here's the funny thing. If like this week I took a week off because I'm running a Spartan race tomorrow. I still kept my calories the same. I didn't down regulate anything or anything like that because I was not moving. I wasn't doing my cycling workouts. I wasn't strength training. Guess what? Kept my calories the same. Guess what? My body weight didn't change at all because guess what? It likes where it's at. And so we have to be in mind, keep it in mind that our body wants to be somewhere happy and it's going to go where we put it. Now, can you overdo that? Yes. If you're going out and eating Dairy Queen and McDonald's and thousands of calories a day and not putting out the output or spending that energy, then yeah, you might have a problem, going on. But to be putting ourselves in these extreme caloric deficits and expecting like we can upregulate the metabolism too. Like I'm sure you have plenty of clients where you work their calories up and their
Oh, yeah.
body finds a very happy place at a higher calorie level.
Yeah, for sure. And I think that you touched on something big. And, obviously when I said that, as far as our tastes and things like that change is, as, speaking to the perimenopausal and the menopausal, clients, understanding that, calories and food quality, these things they work together, meaning that if you're eating, 15, however many calories, but you're filling them with shit, that is going to look very different on your body than if you're filling those exact same calories with nutrient dense whole foods with fibers and things like that. And that's what it comes down to is people, I think it's, with this food quality is they're like, they start eating, like these bird diets, but even, this bird diet is filled with, garbage, like even, a protein bar and Diet Coke and, things like that. And like you said, Dairy Queen, but you could literally eat the same amount of calories and fill it with quality food. And number one, those nutrients are going to drive, your metabolism. It's going to drive brain function. It's going to drive, that thyroid and hormones. And so you're going to yield probably a better looking body, a less watery and inflamed body by eating quality foods. And that's what I do see a lot again with, that population, whether it's college age or, even that, perimenopause, menopause, is that food quality. That's when we start seeing, a lot of the booze coming in and, wanting to have the, extra pieces of cake and, cheesecakes and girls' nights out, which is fine, but understand that that can't be a daily diet.
Right. And then I found another thing is prioritizing protein. Like
Yes.
that is I can't reiterate how important that is. People fill your calories with protein calories because first of all, it's metabolically expensive. Like there's a thermic effect of protein. It just takes our body more calories even to digest the stuff. So, and you are contributing to your body's foundation.
Yep.
So,
Exactly. You're filling your body with what it needs to function, which
yeah.
is the breakdown of that food is going to give it, the vitamins and minerals for function. So yeah.
So I want to reverse just a little bit, and I know that we're making this long-winded here, so I'll try not to make it too long. But you touched on something back there. You were talking at different places in your cycle where estrogen is higher, it's protective, there's anti-inflammatory processes, and then different points in your cycle where insulin sensitivity changes. So how does that look for a postmenopausal woman?
Right. So you're not going to be cycling anymore. If you're postmenopausal, essentially everything, and then let me back up. Menopausal, I want to know how you're menopausal, because obviously I am surgically induced menopausal, meaning I have no lady bits. My bits are gone. However, I do have a uterus, so that is something important to know when talking HRT. If you are, natural menopause, you're going to have your bits. So you are going to have, some hormonal production. If you have had a partial hysterectomy where perhaps you have your bits, but your uterus is gone, again, you're still going to be cycling, and you can still track your cycle by looking at even, some people will have migraines at certain times, and you can almost see this fluctuation of hormones happening and kind of time it that way. But if you are postmenopausal, all of your hormonal production is going to be lower. the caveat here is going to be those androgens. Depends on if you have your ovaries or not. If you don't have ovaries, you're not going to have that production, right? If you still have your ovaries, you're still going to have some androgen production. You're going to have a little bit of estrogen, things like that. And obviously, we do get these hormones from other tissues. So when these hormones decline, understand estrogen helps us with our insulin sensitivity. So when we lose that, or it lowers, and again, this can be applied to even during amenorrhea and things like that. So this can apply to many different people in different parts of their journeys. But menopausal speaking, they're not going to rise back up. That's going to be what it is. And so insulin sensitivity is going to decrease. And so this may be a time where perhaps, again, the quality of, like, say, carbohydrates does need to be looked at, spacing things out. And again, having that good protein is going to play a big part. Understanding that if you are on HRT, you might be a little bit at a user advantage, because you are going to have, a little bit more optimal production overall.
Okay, awesome. Well, I wanted to touch on that before we got off of here, because I think that a lot of people don't understand that there's also changes in insulin sensitivity, which is such a huge thing, because it changes, basically where you should be focusing your priorities when it comes to protein, carbohydrates, and fat. So, yeah. Well, if there was anything that you wanted to get out there in the world that we didn't cover already, what would it be?
Oh man, there's a lot, but I would say biggest thing is really take an inventory of your life. Now, I don't care how old you are. Understand that you can still have fun. You can still compete in bodybuilding competitions. There is a way to go about everything in life, but really take an inventory of your goals, and how you want your future to look, as well as your present. And you need to start working towards those things now, no, regardless of what age you are. Look after stress and manage those adrenals. I cannot reiterate, manage your stress, and what you perceive as stress is going to be far different probably than anything. And that's really crucial. And understand that when you are entering a perimenopause, menopausal time is nothing to be ashamed of. We all have to go through it. I think it's very taboo still, and I think it's very sad. You're looked at as like this old, wretched, haggard creature. And I'm going to encourage you to say it's an awesome time. I think Laura Brydon, she referred to it as another puberty, and I love that. It can be a really incredible time, but it can also be, a really horrible time. So do your due diligence, be an advocate for your health. Don't be dismissed by anybody, and reach out to people. And if it costs you, as far as spending, finances to do it, you are worth it.
Yeah, absolutely. Especially because it will come back to bite you later on. Being
Yeah.
sick or having health conditions are much more expensive than finding somebody that can help you navigate your post-menopausal, premenopausal times and other health
Yeah,
things
you're
going
either
on.
walking towards illness or you're walking towards wellness. And you can choose to change your direction at any time in your life,
Yeah,
at any time.
I love it. So if people want to find you, where do they do that?
Yeah, so I'm on Facebook, Meredith Paci, and I'm on Instagram, Mayor Paci _ I think Scooby Prep. Might have that wrong. And then email is mayor@scoobyprep.com.
And I will make sure and put all of that in the show notes as well. I think I already did, actually, because I pre-wrote these notes because we're traveling. So thank you so much, though, for joining me. It has been such an incredible talk, and you have so much knowledge to share with everyone. So I hope they go find you on social media and give you a follow.
Thank you. Thank you so much for having me.